Hi guys, Nicolette here with Insomnicat. Today we've got Michelle Garrett. She is a public relations consultant and writer. She's joining us today to talk about PR, small business, and all kinds of fun things. Hi Michelle, thank you for joining us.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
So Michelle, for those of our audience who don't know you, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you ended up in PR, doing what you do?
Sure. Well, I've always loved writing and, you have to find a way to kind of do what you love, for a living. So I went to journalism school, kind of concentrated in PR, which was in the School of Journalism. And I've been doing both those things for a long time now. And then along the way, of course, digital media, social media, all of that has come into play. So that it's constantly keeping us on our toes.
So tell us, Michelle, a really simple question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Who should be hiring a PR professional?
Well, I like to say that everybody could benefit from PR, right? I mean, everybody has something they care about. So whether it's your company, your brand, your product, service, your organization, some fandom, or, even yourself, if you're a solopreneur, everyone can benefit from publicity, from promotion. Some people don't like to do it themselves. I have solopreneur clients who, they know how to do PR and they could do their own PR, but they just really are, they don't want to toot their own horn, or they don't want to do the outreach or what have you. So I really don't know too many organizations or people who couldn't benefit from some, good PR pro in their corner. So.
So you mentioned, like a solo entrepreneur. What about startups? What are some of the best ways for companies really starting out to get in front of, the media?
Well, I mean, that's a tough business, a tough industry. I worked out in Silicon Valley for about 7 years. I'm a native Ohioan, so I'm actually back in Ohio now, but I was out there for a while. And I worked with a lot of startups, and of course out there they have a big budget, right? So they're able to.
You're in Silicon Valley, yeah.
But when you get back to the Midwest, those startups do not have much of a budget. And so PR is almost kind of an afterthought, or, oh, it'd be nice to have, but they don't really focus on it as much as out there. Out there in Silicon Valley, of course, they're factoring PR in from the very beginning, from the inception of the company. So I think for those on a budget, I mean, social media is free as much as, you'd say, well, it's pretty time consuming. It can be time consuming, but it is free to set up your accounts. And one of the biggest mistakes I see startups make, I'll read about, say a startup in the paper or something, and I'll go immediately to follow them on social media. And guess what? They don't have an account, or they haven't posted in 6 months, or, you got to kind of keep up with it. So that's one good way to do PR for yourself, but it's also a way to fail if you're not able to keep up with your social media. And on that note, I would say kind of focus maybe on one or two outlets that you think, where your audience is primarily, and then kind of try not to, sink too much time into it, or bring somebody on to help.
So, there's been a lot of social media influencers. That's really the rising thing here. And has that kind of affected or influenced the PR space? Have you noticed that changing some of what you do with your clients? Have they taken an interest in influencer marketing as opposed to PR, or implementing that into their PR strategy? How is that working?
It's very interesting, because I think those of us in PR, when we hear terms like influencer marketing, we kind of chuckle a little bit, because I think for PR pros, we have been doing influencer marketing forever. Reporters and analysts, they are influencers. And back in my days at working at an agency before I went out on my own, this was, a number of years ago, they had what they called like an influencer chart of the top 20 influencers, and they would gauge, this was for Adobe at the time. So it would be like, well, how much are they talking about Adobe, and was it favorable, or is it, so it was really rudimentary at that time. But I mean, that is what it was. And so I still, companies like Meltwater, their database, they call their journalist database an influencer database. But now when we're talking about influencer marketing, the way I think that most people are talking about it, I think companies can spend a lot of money and maybe waste a lot of money on it unless they do it thoughtfully, Micro influencers are really big. Audiences are more engaged, I think. And just be very careful to vet who you're working with. I think it's always better if you can let the influencer speak in their tone of voice, on your behalf, but, maybe not give them a script, or maybe not, kind of let them say it or write it from their heart. And then just be very upfront that, obviously it is an influencer speaking on your behalf. They're being paid, that's a big deal. Of course, we have to, disclose that.
Right.
But things like Firefest, I mean, that's just, obviously a case study that will never go away as far as the power of influencer marketing, but also the power of influencer marketing to kind of fool people. And, it's not a good thing. So.
Mm-hmm. So currently, what are your clients experiencing? I mean, 2020 has begun. Everybody's talking about trends and challenges and overcoming challenges. And so what are you noticing as we enter 2020 that your clients are really faced with? And, kind of how are you solving that with them?
Yeah. Well, there's so much. I mean, obviously we're in an election year. There's the news cycle is endless, nonstop. I mean, so there's a lot of noise. There's always competition. I always chuckle again at companies that I talk to that say they don't have any competitors because, again, we all have competitors. So whether you know it or not,
Yep.
you have competitors. So, and you should be watching what they're doing. And so getting, kind of how you're going to rise above the noise, and instead of just like rushing out and doing stuff, like, oh, we're going to rush out and do this thing, someone's going to notice it for sure. That's not really a strategy. It's not really a good plan. So one of the things I'm trying to think about and have clients do is kind of take a breath, take a pause, slow down a little bit. Let's back up and think about what it is that you really want to accomplish, and then the best way to get there. So instead of just, okay, we're going to put out this press release, or we're going to post this on social media, or we're going to write that blog post, or, why? What are you doing? And another thing is, how many things can you do with one, piece of news, or one story, or one piece of content? You can repurpose it. And that's one of the best things about PR, is that it's repurposable and it's also credible. So, if a reporter writes a story about you, that's, somebody else talking about you in a favorable way. That's going to probably be more credible than you saying, yes, we're the greatest thing since sliced bread.
Mm-hmm.
So,
right.
You raised a point that actually we've spoken to a few PR folks about in the past, and that's ROI. We're always talking about, we actually just had a conversation with someone the other day. Well, how are you, because everybody, how do you prove, are there any guarantees you ever give your clients?
No. No. In fact, run away. I wrote a post about it. I'm like, no, if they tell you they guarantee anything, and I get email. I must be on a list, and I actually pushed back a little bit on these people were sending me these email. I guess it was a PR firm that said, we guarantee you placement. Well, if you pay for it, that's not PR. That's not pure earned media.
Right.
Not to say that you can't do that, but you shouldn't call it PR or earned media or whatever the terminology they were using it wasn't truthful. And so a lot of people in PR who are credible, who are good at what they do, would push back and say, no, and you can't guarantee, because you can get a story really far along. You can, the PR person plants the seed, with the reporter. The reporter can do the interview. They can talk to, you provide additional sources from the talk. They can get all the way down. And then when it comes time to air the story or publish the story, something else can bump it, or conditions can change, or, things can happen that are out of our control when it comes to PR. It's not like an ad. You bought an ad, it was, this much money, it's going to show up on page 5, it's going to be this big on Tuesday, you don't know those things. So to do PR, there is a risk involved, and, to ever guarantee or promise otherwise, I think is not being completely upfront.
It's not PR, basically.
Yeah, if you're paying, you're obviously paying if you're paying a consultant or somebody, an agency to do your PR, you're paying, for their time, but you shouldn't be paying for the placement. That's a different animal. So
how do you kind of, if you have clients who ask that question, is that, what is your response to them? How do you tell them, I'm going to do this, but I'm not guaranteeing you anything, you know?
It does come up, and I'm pretty upfront about it. In fact, if they don't bring it up, sometimes I will, just because I want to make sure they understand. And a lot of people do, but there are a lot that do not understand. In fact, you know, when I give talks, I'm always like, let's compare advertising and PR. Let's like actually go through this little chart that says your PR does this, advertising does this. It's not, they're not the same thing. So, and some people don't get it. I mean, PR, there's some kind of, it's shrouded in mystery for, you know, it's hard to even explain sometimes, but I always, you know, it's more than just media relations too. That's another thing that people think is that that's all we do is write press releases and send them to journalists and try to get started. You know, there are other things that we do. We do messaging. You know, we try to work on companies to plan for a crisis. We help them, you know, figure out the best imagery, the best visual. I mean, there's all kinds of things that we do. So, you know, I don't know. It's confusing sometimes.
So I have a question. You talked about, and you sort of came back to it a little bit here about that messaging. You mentioned earlier, you know, one of the things you were working on a lot was that company's messaging that comes out, right? And so how important is, you know, because we just recently talked about how important it is, like if you're creating a message, whatever that message is, whether it's in a press release or whether it's a social media post, like how you should go about that, right? Like how important that is. So how important is it to make sure that that messaging is correct for whatever you're trying to get, and important and sort of important to the users or the people that are going to read it, you know, not so much just about your company, but about why it's important to them. You know,
I think it's really important to focus on what it does for them. You know, it's not about you, it's about your customers. So if you have a product, you have a service, you know, promoting an event, you know, whatever it is, you have to think about, you know, why would they want to attend the event? Or, you know, what is this product going to do for them? What problems is it going to solve? That kind of thing. So I think the messaging needs to be less focused on, we do this, we are the best. We're, you know, that's not what people are really looking for. They want to know when they go to seek out a solution for a problem, this solves this problem for me because, or how, or, you know, that kind of thing.
We come across that a lot, even, you know, because we create content for clients, and they, you know, one of my pet peeves is that, you know, clients contract all this content, and then you sit down with them and you said, we want to talk about this product. It's wonderful. And here are all the specs. And, you know, so, I mean, I'm sure you kind of come across the same thing. You know, I mean, what is that conversation like with the client? Like, how do you get them to kind of, if they're very, very, you know, stubborn, you know, how do you kind of sway them into seeing that that's not the way to go?
It's hard sometimes. I think the more you work with a client, you know, the more they might trust you, especially if you show the value, show the wins, show what you know, that your way was the right way, maybe.
Right.
But there are times when it's really hard to get them to see it your way or try your way. And in those cases, I would say, you know, you just try to bring to bear, you know, the benefit of your experience and maybe examples of how it worked for other companies or other clients. But a lot of times in PR, we work with engineers. You know, I worked in tech a lot. And so, you know, engineers are not marketers, and they're not going to tell you, you know, in the language that you need to convey. They're going to tell you in language that they understand that's meaningful to them. Well, our customer is not an engineer, most likely. I mean, you know, it depends, but yeah, so you need to then be able to
translate.
Yeah. And it takes some time, some skill, you know, some experience, I think, especially with situations like that, where you're like, okay, what are we really talking about here? So
we know that one well, painfully well.
Yeah. So are there any tips maybe you could give between, you know, because we just talked about like tech marketing, which is, or tech PR, right, which is very different than other types of PR. Is there something that people that are in tech PR should take into consideration that's different than other types of PR?
Well, again, I think a lot of times you end up working with these very smart, very technical engineers, you know, and so I think it's important to have the engineer, to have the marketer, to have the PR person, and have everybody kind of be maybe working together, brainstorming together, distilling messages then that kind of resonate and maybe hit all of the bases. You know, you can certainly include technical messaging in there, but just maybe not lead with that. I would say pick, you know, 1 to 3 key messages and kind of hound on those, and, you know, just keep kind of pounding on those, especially if you're preparing spokespeople to do an on-camera interview or anything like that. You know,
Mhm.
you got to boil it down to a couple nuggets that people are going to remember, and it's not going to be, oh, it supports, you know, this platform and this or that. You know, that's not going to be the takeaway that people are going to really remember. But you can certainly include that in a press release or something. I would say, yes, we want that in there, but maybe just down, you know, not leading with it, just down a little bit further.
Well, Michelle, Bryan, do you have anything else? I'm sorry, I was just...
No, I think you covered it all. Thank you, Michelle, for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It was fun.
And Michelle, if our audience wants to learn more about you, where can they find you?
Well, my website is just my name, so it's michellegarrett.com, and I'm very active on Twitter, and my Twitter handle is PRIsUs. And I will also be presenting at the Digital Branding Summit later this month. That is a free virtual event sponsored by the Digital Branding Institute. It's the week of January 27th, and my presentation is on the 29th about using PR to help build your credibility. So maybe we'll see some of your listeners there.
Absolutely.
Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much, Michelle.
Thank you.